Backhand kick, and what a goal it was! Stewart makes it 1-1.
And it is a gorgeous little chip.
This could well be the moment. It is the moment.
Welcome to Kickoff, the Football New South Wales official podcast for NPL New South Wales men's and women's, and also Football New South Wales leagues competitions. My name is Teo Pellizzeri, back for another season. This is our men's season preview. We are assembling in January to record it because it's a February season kickoff, and I'm joined by my co-host, Maeve Sparrow. Maeve, Happy New Year, and great to see you again.
Great to see you too, Teo.
And joining us for the season preview is one of the preeminent commentators in NPL New South Wales. We heard him on last season's men's grand final, Alex Molchanoff. Molchy, great to see you.
Thanks for having me, Teo. Very, very excited. February start means more football to take in.
Now, we didn't have a very long off-season, did we? Because we were following and covering the Australian Championship all the way to its conclusion in December. But I don't think that's a bad thing. We've only had to wait, dare I suggest, 6-7 weeks until we actually get to cover NPL all over again.
Just enough time to sneak down to the beach and get your holidays in. And then I was ready to start making phone calls and bugging coaches and administrators around the league, Teo. That's what it's all about.
And Maeve, you actually broadened the horizons. You went out to some of the other state federations. We won't hold that against you. You went up to the northern New South Wales to cover a bit of Australian Championship, but you were getting out to the venues as well. It's starting to feel like a 12-month of the year commitment, and many clubs were already back in pre-season while the Australian Championship was still going for the clubs who were still finishing 2025. So it never really ends, does it?
No, it doesn't. And honestly, I really enjoy the fact that it doesn't ever end because there's always games to go to and things to see. And yeah, I definitely did visit a few other states member feds, which was great. Victoria, surprisingly, was probably one of my favourites.
Oh, really? Okay, well, I'm not surprised to hear
this
that,
is
actually.
turning into another Teo Pellizzeri hosted Football Victoria propaganda podcast.
No, it isn't. We are going to hone right in on the 2026 NPL Men's New South Wales season. We're going to summarise everything that's coming up, everything that the teams have to play for this calendar year, and also take a look back and a look forward at what we can anticipate in the new season. You're listening to Kickoff. All right, so let's dive right into it. Maeve Sparrow, lead us off with the beginning of the summary of each trophy, where it went last season, and we will just have a quick reflection on the 2025 that was.
Alrighty, we're going to kick it off with the NPL defending champions. We've got RPL Leichhardt and Rockdale in the grand final, with the final score ending up 2-1 and RPL taking out the championship.
And this is really interesting. It's the continuation of one success story in terms of RPL and the dominant side they are building into in this state. Trophies in each of their last 3 seasons, and a bit of the end of the road for Rockdale, who I don't think many expected to get through the final series and play in that grand final. Alec Urusevsky gets his grand final goal, but unfortunately departs the club without winning that trophy. Will he be back next year? We'll wait and see. But there's a bit of a rebuild for Paul D and Rockdale to do in 2026.
And speaking of, the NPL competition, we want to talk about the premiers, NWS Spirit. They're defending premiers, and they finished top of the table ahead of RPL Leichhardt. Tell us a little bit about that, Teo.
Well, it was one of the great stories, wasn't it? A team third season after promotion.
Correct. And
had never been in the top flight of New South Wales football before. And so a new premier, top of the pile. Again, it's a landmark in their history, which they have then had to move on from very quickly, though. And we will get into the comings and goings, but just to acknowledge it in its own right, one of the great climbs for, I think, a club that is establishing a reputation as, a modern-day 21st century power.
And we'll get to them, but I think some people are expecting, once again, for them to sort of fall out of favour or out of contention for trophies. I doubt that's going to happen. I'll make that just a little sneak peek of what's going to happen.
Good sell.
That's
a tease. All right. Yep.
Now, moving on to another piece of silverware, the Waratah Cup, Sydney United 58 are the defending champions after beating the Northern Tigers in the final. Alex, tell us a bit about that.
Well, this is their specialty. They have become the cup team. They get Miro Vlastelica back in charge, who guided them to the Australia Cup final in 2022, a squad that's got a lot of experience back and just become the masters of knockout football. I don't know how they continue to do it, but they do. And I'm expecting another run from them in this tournament again.
With a bit of distance, it wasn't a particularly memorable final. Midwinter rainy night at Valentine Sports Park, but the United fans that went along, again, adding to their club's, decorated trophy cabinet with another win.
And in a season, I think, apart from that, they'll be a little bit disappointed with. So it's given them something to hold and something to grow from in 2026.
A competition that all of us were a part of was the Australian Championship. We had 5 New South Wales teams compete, with Marconi progressing the furthest. They were runners-up to South Melbourne in the final.
And very intriguing final with a couple of sliding doors moments. And we saw the introduction of football video review rather than VAR. So the first time we've genuinely had VAR type attention on the NPL level of competition, which I think for the most part worked. But I don't think we'll be rushing to introduce it to the Football New South Wales, I don't know, for argument's sake, the final series at the end of the 2026 season. What did you make of the 5 New South Wales teams just broadly competing in the Australian Championship?
Well, and just quickly on FVS, if we do, a camera on the goal line, I think Peter Kennis will be asking for. But no, I think it was overall a little disappointing. Sydney United and Sydney Olympic not getting out of the group was a shame. But I think New South Wales also produced the highlight of the championship. That game between Apia and Marconi is going to be a game that goes down in the history of this competition, in the history of Australian football, as one of the great knockouts.
And I would hope that every sponsorship proposal and every conversation that's being had by both FA and the respective clubs includes the highlights, the crowd, the post-game scenes of something that, as you say, I think it was the high point of the entire competition.
And more of it to come. Get out there,
Yeah.
This is what we're sitting here doing, is encouraging you to get out to games. We can create atmospheres like that one we had at Leichhardt Oval on a Friday night in November.
It was beautiful. I was there behind the goal when the penalty shootout was happening.
Brilliant.
It absolutely erupted at Leichhardt Oval. All of the ultras, all of the fans. The atmosphere was electric, off the charts. And I definitely agree. Get out there, support your local NPL club, and also the Australian Championships and all the cups that we've got going on this season. The last piece of silverware, the Australia Cup, we had Sydney United out to Sydney FC and Apia Leichhardt out to Avondale. They went the furthest out of the 4 New South Wales teams in the Cup. Tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, it wasn't exactly a great year for our teams. Our teams, he says. I wear many hats. It wasn't a great year for the Football New South Wales teams in the Australia Cup. With that said, I mean, I don't think we necessarily saw the best reflection of who was performing in the league at the time. Spirit weren't there, Rockdale weren't there. And this can happen. Sometimes you get surprises. We had teams from lower divisions making deep cup runs in the Waratah Cup. And the trade-off for that is you don't necessarily send your strongest teams to the Australia Cup.
And then you get Sydney United, who have been so strong in this competition, draw probably one of the strongest A-League clubs in the second round.
And not the first time they'd had a bumper crowd out at King Tom for an A-League opponent. And I remember the controversy about the bill after the game with Ante Juric not being able to coach against Sydney FC. And, I guess it continues to provide storylines. Yes. But this wasn't the year, put it that way.
No. Maybe we're due.
We're due
this year.
So those were the trophies, but Maeve, we've got some other important landmarks from 2025 we need to talk about.
Yes, we're switching the speed to the relegations. We had Mount Druitt Town Rangers, who were relegated, and since then, they've changed their name to Western City Rangers.
I mean, firstly, before the name change, it wasn't a great season for Mount Druitt, and they've been a yo-yo club, and it's unfortunate that they weren't able to put up more of a fight this time around in the division, especially given that they represent, unlike the sort of hotbed corridor of New South Wales football, they're a little bit further out in a different part of the city, and it's a shame they went down.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. But they just, too much turnover of players in the middle of the year, a change of head coach. It was sort of all headed that way. They didn't particularly, those teams down the bottom of it, it's so important that you continue putting yourself in games, giving yourself the opportunity to pick up points week on week. They didn't do that consistently enough, and that's how they found themselves in bottom spot.
And I'm sure we could argue, especially if we had maybe Nick Kutniak here, about the name change to the Western Sydney Rangers. But if you're looking at the ladder and you're wondering what's happened,
Yes.
if you've maybe had a bit of a longer summer off and you're thinking, who are the Western Sydney Rangers and what happened to Mount Druitt Town? Well, they did change their name and their logo, and to an extent their colours. So I wish them all the best. I'm sure the new committee has the best of intentions, but it was a little jarring to see that name and those colours disappear.
At least the Rangers name is held. I think that's really important in the history of New South Wales football, that there is some continuity there. And hopefully this signals a turn. I think they're going to be competitive down in League One again. Apparently there's money to spend, so let's see if they can bounce straight back up and make more of a fist of it with this new name and moniker and logo.
And in the promotion relegation playoff, it was won by Southern District Raiders, who won 3-2 on aggregate against the Central Coast Mariners. They won the second leg 1-0 thanks to a beautiful wonder goal. Tell us about that, Alex.
Well, Mio Marcic, who has, been in NPL land before, I think they're very excited about what they can produce. They play a terrific brand of football, SD Raiders. I'm looking forward to seeing what they can produce. Ernie Smith Reserve, by all reports, is back up and ready to go. The main pitch is grassed and ready, and to have everybody sitting in that lovely grandstand down there.
And they're, again, part of the hotbed
Yes.
of Western Sydney
but have had to compete because of that, Teo.
Yeah.
When you've got those two neighbours in Marconi and Sydney United in your backyard, it is a club built on the community, hard-working volunteers who don't see a lot of reward for their work, but this promotion and some visits from some big clubs, I think, is going to produce that for them this season.
And obviously the Mariners have had their challenges, and we are a Football New South Wales platform, so all we can say for now is keep an eye on the Football New South Wales website for how that situation unfolds, both with the APL end of the club ownership of the A-League team, but also what it means for NPL, for their junior teams. It's an ongoing situation, and none of us are any wiser as to any developments as we record this podcast today.
What I will say is big credit to Central Coast United, who have been a massive support while all this has gone on. Opened up their basically academies and their junior sides to players who are in limbo. So it's good to see some silver lining come out of what has been a very difficult time up in Gosford.
And Maeve, one other significant moment that affected the top flight of NPL.
Yes, the promotion. We had the University of New South Wales finish top of the Football New South Wales League One by 1 point in a thrilling 2-1 win against Northern Tigers in the final round. What a game it was, Teo.
And there was we had Claudio Fabiano come on this podcast during the season to talk about the night that UNSW played Marconi in the Waratah Cup. And now they've had another memorable Saturday night out there that's gone one better at the Village Green.
I was lucky enough to be out there calling it, and it was a sense of occasion. There was a lot of the old boys out there. UNSWFC has got a long and storied history, but not a particularly successful one. So, making it to the top tier of New South Wales football for the first time is a massive achievement, a massive congratulations to Gabe Knowles and a lot of that core of the squad who have carried them all the way from the old NPL 4 as it was. 3 promotions. It's been a fantastic journey for them, and let's hope they can put up a good fight and maybe even stay up.
So that was all the important things that happened in 2025. Some of them already feel like a long time ago. They're going to feel like ancient history by the end of the coming season. You're listening to Kickoff. We're going to get into our rapid fire look at the team by team. Every team will be talked about as part of today's podcast, so keep listening. Every NPL New South Wales match live, free and on demand on YouTube. Subscribe to the Football New South Wales YouTube channel today.
All right, Alex and Teo, let's kick it off with SD Raiders. They finished second in the Football New South Wales League One. For their wins, they had 18, draws 4, losses 8, and for goals 4. They had 52 and against 33. They won the promotion relegation playoff against Central Coast Mariners. The Waratah Cup, they were out in the semi-final to Sydney United, and Australia Cup, they were out in the round of 32. Alex, tell us a bit about their squad.
I'm really excited, as I just said. And we got to see a glimpse of what they're capable of last year in the Waratah Cup. They went on that giant killing run where they knocked out Blacktown, Rockdale and Wollongong. Like those are three big scalps, even in the context of the NPL New South Wales competition. And Marcic has showed that he's got an attacking ability. And there's been some really subtle additions, Teo, that Goran Laboya has been able to make. Like even Ethan Bevan at the back, he's been away from the game with some personal issues, but comes back in to solidify what at times was a little bit of a ropey defence. And then when you look forward, Thomas Mako, Luka Knezovic coming in, Robert Aramugo was one of the signatures clubs were chasing after his Player of the Year season in Football New South Wales League One last year. And Marty Fernandez has been around the traps for a long time. We know what he's capable of.
And they came so close to scoring against MacArthur in that Australia Cup tie when I think it was still either 0-0 or 1-0. And then once it was 2-0, it was a good night. But I guess what is the sales pitch for SD Raiders to consolidate and stay up in the division? Because do you think they would have greater ambitions than simply avoid relegation? Like, do you think they're coming in thinking we can push into mid-table, or would priority number one simply be consolidate, stay up?
I think they'll attack in looking to do that. But yes, that has to be the goal, is stay out of the relegation playoff. Make sure you have consolidated it well enough to be playing NPL football next season. We've seen the challenge that Mount Druitt have had doing that sort of thing, but the last team to come up via the promotion relegation playoff, St George FC, have gone on to do it quite well. So it shows that they're not necessarily less likely to stay up than UNSW, for example.
Speaking of UNSW, we're going to wrap into them next. They finished first on the ladder and were promoted from the Football New South Wales League One. They had 17 wins, 8 draws, 5 losses. They had 57 goals for and 31 against. In the Waratah Cup, they were out in round 4 to Blacktown City.
A really strong side put together by Gabe Knowles, and a little bit different in their composition in that they did rely a little bit more heavily on their defence than SD Raiders, and they bring in some really good reinforcements in that area of the pitch. Grant Lynch and Lockie Campbell, both grand final winners with Blacktown a couple of years ago. A new goalkeeper in Tristan Prendergast. Let's hope he's fit again. Teo, I'll ask you, how do you see their season unfolding, and will they have the goals to be competitive week on week?
Great question, because you're right. Ollie Pufflet, obviously vastly experienced, but not a prolific scorer in the top division. Maybe they unearth someone out of this squad. I think the other intrigue is it's another synthetic team coming up. Now, how would you look? That pitch seems to be fairly regulation size. Maybe it's just misleading because of the markings and also the
angle you see.
The flatness of the grandstand, and also just the lighting. They play a lot of night games there. So. But I do think that, especially if they promote well on campus, they can actually build a bit of a home ground advantage with regards to atmosphere and turning it into an occasion. I mean, this is a university team. They've got a unique point of difference here that can actually make an away trip to the Village Green really challenging for away teams because of all the little X factors and 1%ers that we've just mentioned. But you're right to identify maybe goal scoring as the number one challenge for this team to stay up. And how do you see winning a really tight arm wrestle that was more than just a two-way battle? It was at times a 4-5-6 team battle to finish top, rather than, say, a runaway champion who already had a ready-made team to step into the top flight. Because while they haven't done a huge amount of renovation on this squad, they have had to add some names who know what the Cape is all about and can remind the ones who've never played at this level before about what it's going to take.
It has the character of a team that knows what it needs to do in an arm wrestle. You're right to point that out, Teo. And, they were in plenty of those games last season. They got through more than their fair share. 8 draws, that tells you it wasn't all straightforward for them. And I think that's going to bring them up with a certain character. I don't know if that's reading into things too much, but then you look at guys that have been up at this level before and can provide that moment of magic. Connor Quilligan's been, a really sturdy player that can produce a big moment when it's needed of him down in League One for a long time. Nathan Roberts as well is a massive character guy. He really drives them when you watch them. And Jack Fulton, who's spent time with Manly United, it was a while ago now, but has played at this level before and is another one of those who really seems to unify the team as much as anything, and the goal threat that he can provide.
Now moving into the NPL, we have Western Sydney Wanderers. They were 14th on the ladder with 7 wins, 7 draws and 16 losses. They had 29 goals for and 51 against. Alex, tell us a bit about their squad.
Well, we do. It's a great question, mate. We don't actually have one to hand as we record this. There's been a bit of upheaval in the Western Sydney Wanderers football club over the last 24 hours with their head coach of their men's team moving on A-League level. That's meant that Damir Prodanovic, who was set to come in as their head coach for the NPL, has been promoted, I guess, in a sense, to the assistant role under Gary Van Egmond there now. So there's a lot of question marks around this team.
Well, the question marks, like, we know that this team values the NPL enough to drop senior players back to get them enough points to avoid relegation. We've seen Dylan Perez play NPL. We've seen, it's extraordinary to think that Zach Sapsford and Marcus Eunice played the first half of the 2023, was it 2024 season?
2024.
2024.
That's mad.
That recent.
Yeah, that recent.
It's absurd to think they were playing the first half, not just a game or two, half a season in NPL only 2 seasons ago. So we know that they will drop quality down to the NPL to just ensure that they keep their head above water. And you saw it firsthand. Well, I think Will Constantinidis saw it firsthand last season, where Stadge went along to some of the games at the back end when they just wanted to shore up their spot and make sure they avoided the pro-roll playoff. And I think to basically steal a Vince Rigari talking point, a club-wide philosophy on what they want to achieve, how they want to achieve it, and the identity they want to build is going to flow down to the NPL. I mean, there's a lot of rumours around about other previous NPL figures. You know, Rob Stanton is publicly linked with the job as currently Graham Arnold's assistant coach of Iraq. He knows not just the A-League landscape, but he knows the NPL landscape. And then he would know who to install as NPL coach to see that next generation through. In terms of the green shoots coming up from underneath, yes, their NPL team struggled for a lot of last season. They were the lowest safe team from the Pro Roll playoff. But how did their 20s go last season?
Second only to Manly United.
Okay.
And scored the most goals in the competition. So I think we can expect to see some players that are going to provide some entertainment, and some names that we don't know right now are going to spring into prominence over the course of the 30 rounds.
I think keep an eye on the Emerging Socceroos Championship. It's in April this year because of the World Cup. They normally hold it in the middle of winter, but you'll see lots of sort of 14 to 16-year-olds with Western Sydney Wanderers next to their name. And it wouldn't shock me if quite a few of those end up making their NPL debut at some point after April.
Now we're moving up the ladder to 13th, which was Sutherland Sharks. They had 7 wins, 5 draws, 18 losses, 28 goals for and 53 against. They've got a new coach, David Perkovic, you know. Mirko, tell us about it.
Well, this is going to be very, very interesting. This is the team that have been most talked about in the off-season because of the scale of the signings, because of the fact that the premiership winning coach is now there.
And they're publishing their own documentary talking about their story too. So, and we love that extra level of investment at an NPL level to sort of hero and showcase the competition. I'm eagerly anticipating watching all the episodes.
And I think some of the footage is going to be pretty good as well. There's been a lot of doing up of the clubhouse. Smithy's Bar up there is going to have an extra arm, a VIP area, all this sort of stuff. It's really becoming an event to go to a game at Seymour Shore, which is really, really good. And they're going to have a team to cheer on. There's a couple of premiership winners that have followed Perko over, Jordan Perez, Jamie Pashevsky was at the heart of their defence, and Takumi Yafuga is one of the best midfielders in the competition. You add players like Tice Van Amarongan, I'll get that one right by the time we start in round 1, Teo. Daniel Nizic was one of the best goalkeepers in the competition last year, and he's one of the few they've retained along with Tarek Meyer. It's an overhauled squad, but one I think is going to be right in the premiership picture straight away. Straight
away, okay, because jumping into the top 6, you'd suspect that would be the minimum benchmark. Like if they get hit by injuries or if it takes a bit longer to gel than expected, you'd think that just making finals would be the bare minimum, or do you think that like actually challenging for the premiership is the bare minimum?
Well, that's what's coming out of the club at the moment. We just want to gel everyone together. It's going to take some time. They've had some affected pre-season games already. I know talking to a couple of people at the club that's been an issue for them. Some guys coming back from injury. I haven't mentioned that the gold medal winner is there now, returning there, Nick Olsen as well. That's a massive signing. And I think it's going to put them right in contention. I know that's what the club are saying. You know, finals is fine. We want to be competing for trophies. It might not be a premiership straight away, but I just look at the names on paper that we have in front of us, and I think they're going to be thrust right into that contention.
The other factor is this is a team you suspect that will be quite agile during the transfer window in season. If things aren't going to plan, or even if they are going to plan and they feel like they need just a couple more pieces to put them over the top, we know that this team will be active to try and seize that opportunity. And that probably conditions a lot of our predictions here, that you just never know who might get poached by the A-League, sold overseas, which definitely affected the team David Perkovic was coaching last season, or potentially make some additions of their own based on who leaves the A-League and who's out there from Australians overseas coming back to the country as well.
Well, and they've got connections with the players in there. You know, these are guys that have been around at a top level for a very long time, a Brendan Gann, a Tarek Meyer, a Danny Choi. They've got relationships that the players might be able to call on as well at some stage through the season. So, Sutherland amongst the favourites for me as we sit here in late January.
Up next, we have St George FC. They were 12th on the ladder. They had 8 wins, 8 draws, 14 losses. They had 44 goals for and 55 against. In the Waratah Cup, they were out in round 4 to Sydney Olympic. Alex, tell us a little bit about them.
Well, they impressed us for the first third of the season. They were playing very attacking and probably caught some teams by surprise with just how proactive they were with the football and how direct at different times. They've retained a lot of that first 11 that did the job for Fabian Michelli in that season. They've got a new coach in Rafael Marie, but they have been able to retain most of that first 11. Bay Antoniu's the big name that has moved on to Bankstown City. I think they're a chance to continue with that if they can just build a little bit more depth. I'm hearing there are going to be a couple of new signings coming in before we get to the start of the season as well, which is a positive sign. And if they can build on the base that they set for themselves in that opening third of the season, Teo, then perhaps they're an outside chance of finals.
Well, I think the continuity is a great argument for them. But what about the coaching change? Because that is one thing that isn't continuous from last season to this season.
So Rafa was in charge of Spirits under 20s last year. He comes in there. He's very well liked by everybody that's worked with him, in the people that I've talked to anyway, which is a good sign. David Perkovic is very high on his footballing brain. That's a very good reference from my point of view.
Well, and Spirit have an excellent reputation for developing coaches too.
Yeah, very good point. And they've still got young players who are finding their feet at this level, mixed in with good experienced campaigners like Pat O'Shea and Anthony Morabito and Mark Rodich. They've got fire, they've got brimstone, and they've got that little bit of quality with players like Justin Poon and Jaden Casella, who I think, even more than Antonio, was their standout when he was fit and playing consistently last season. Evan Suris came on in spades. There is a really solid foundation from which to build on there.
11th on the table, we had Manly United with 9 wins, 7 draws and 14 losses with 40 goals for and 46 against. In the Waratah Cup, they were out in round 5 to Hills United. Alex, what can we expect from them this season?
A lot of youth. This is a team that won the 20s last year. They've lost a couple of their big names. You're looking at guys like Alan Aganovich, who've been there for a while. Harry van der Sarg is gone. So you are relying on a core of players like Aaron O'Driscoll and Jesse Perez to lift them up. Mackenzie Ciron is returning, which I think is a positive sign in goal. They've lost Levi Kay, who was a high-performing goalkeeper there. But then they got a few really impressive players in Jasper Chipman, who I like the look of when he was playing last year. Saxon Hillier's returned to the club, and Stefan Derobelard, who's bounced in and around day-league academies for a little while, is there as well. So there's plenty to build on. New coach Vladimir Gnezovic, who has a history of working in youth development, so that fits in with the profile of the squad that Manly have built.
My big concern is 1 or 2 youth players too many in your starting 11 every week, and you do reach the tipping point where it just becomes incredibly hard to win. Have Manly flown too close to the wind, or do you think this team has still enough senior leadership that it can survive, say, the midwinter grind, an injury crisis, fixture pile up, if they go on a cup run, for example? Do you think that they've got the squad depth here to basically make sure that it's mid-table at a minimum, and maybe, best case scenario, push for final, sure, but that they don't get dragged into a potential relegation battle this season?
Yeah, I'm edging towards lower mid-table. I'm on the same page as you with that, Teo. What I would say, though, is that the quality of those youngsters...
Well, they have a great reputation.
It's really good. It's really good. They're very excited about some of these players they've got in. And when you're talking about guys like Chipman and Hillier, they've been at NPL level for a couple of years now.
But
at least
the
Hillier
better
has.
you play, the less likely you are to stay for an entire 30
No,
game
that's
season.
a very good point.
That is the other problem.
A very good point. So, yeah, you could be right on that front. If they do lose players like that in mid-season, there's going to be some kids that are going to have to step up and very quickly to make sure they are not in that relegation battle.
Sydney FC was 10th on the table with 9 wins, 7 draws, 14 losses. They had 43 goals for and 46 against. What can we expect? What are we looking forward to?
Well, I spoke to Jimmy Van Wieren today. He's very confident. He thinks he's got a good group of players that have been around the NPL system for a couple of years now, like they did when that Sapsford, Kaczarski, Segicic, Priestman Holman as well, were playing well and competing for finals back in 2022. That's 4 years ago.
Gee,
that was now.
Like, if you want to see the future of the A-League, it doesn't necessarily have to be Sydney FC. They are carrying the work for a lot of other teams.
100%.
And just think about Oscar Fryer scoring that goal in the Australia Cup final and then tearing his ACL. And it's kind of heartbreaking that it's his second one. But he was playing for Sydney FC a couple of years ago too. Keely Adamson, who got sold overseas, but he played for MacArthur. He wasn't at Sydney FC either. Like, they just keep producing every single year.
I think they are. I think it's fair to say they're the best performing academy in the A-League at the moment, and we get the fruits of that in terms of their NPL side. I think they're going to have access to guys like Wataru Kamijo and perhaps to a lesser extent Thiago Quintal, who's a personal favourite, but he's playing so well at the moment and really getting a look into their A-League side. But guys like Camijo, guys like Marin France, who have been in and around their A-League squad, are still going to be playing a fair number of games, at least before the mid-season transfer window opens, in terms of the A-League clubs having to roll over their contracts.
I guess the thing for Sydney FC is like they're kind of like an auditor in that if you beat them, you're good enough to play finals. If you're losing to them, you're probably not. But they themselves always hit that sort of rhythm of Australia Cup starts, A-League preseason starts, and it does tail off their form. So even if they pop up and have unexpected wins at times in those challenging, flashpoints of the season, they do not have the consistency to push in and actually mount a finals campaign. I guess what they need is a particularly special group of players who are maybe just good enough to lead the team into NPL finals, but are not so good that it's off to the A-League. And that's the balancing act that I think Jimmy Van Wieren very maturely has been able to understand. And I feel like he is almost selfless in the way he develops players, because it's not about, where he finishes on the ladder for him each season, because he, isn't making finals with this team and is still doing, you'd have to say an A or an A+ job.
He'd have 30, 40 players that have made A-League appearances over the last 4 or 5 years that have been under his tutelage. And I think in his role, that is probably his biggest KPI. I can't speak highly enough of the work he's done, and hopefully that means another strong season coming for Sydney FC.
Put it this way, they don't get amazing crowds, and I realise they don't have a designated home ground. Yes. They have moved around. But if you've never actually gone and given this team a look,
no.
They are a good day out, I would say.
Or a good Friday night out.
Or a good Friday, but they are a good watch for the football purist.
Very much so.
It's not. They don't have the Cove. They don't have amazing atmospheres.
Well, they do get a
they get
a
smattering of Cove depending on the day of the week and the weather. But like, if you just want to actually go and watch a team play good football, yeah they're worth it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Day after day, Kappa rewrites the concept of sportswear. Kappa means teamwork, past, present, and future. Kappa never stops, 'cause winning starts within. 2 people, 1 brand. Kappa.
9th on the ladder, we had St. George City with 10 wins, 7 draws, and 13 losses. They had 37 goals for and 42 against. In the Waratah Cup, they were out to Rockdale in round 4. Alex, what's the vibe looking like for this year?
Well, there's a lot of turnover, as there is every season at St. George City, but I think in terms of the players they've retained, they are the heart and soul of the club now. Salim Monahan-Viker and Tarek Erkan's names spring off the page at me, and I think they've added really cleverly around them with players like Bray Ovens coming to the club. I've loved the flashes I've seen of him at Rockdale. I know they're very high as well on Hugo McAteer, who's coming to the club this year. And Jared Massarola has been around a couple of very successful clubs clubs in his time. He's obviously relegated with Mount Druitt Town Rangers last year, but I think he can add a certain steel alongside the likes of Curry and guys like that. There's no big name up front for them this year with Mark McNulty departing, but I think there's enough talent there that they're going to be able to find the back of the net consistently. And as we know, it's an away day nobody likes, going down to Penshurst Park and that tiny pitch.
With that said, it's a nice away day in the stadium. Maybe not for the players. Yes. I actually quite enjoy going to Penshurst Park.
I love
as a
calling.
commentator.
Don't get me wrong. I love calling from there. It's fantastic.
But no, I agree with you in that. Is the evenness of the squad? It means they're kind of crisis-proof in terms of injuries, and
they did have a few of them last year.
If players have agreed to mid-season holidays and in the European summer and so forth, but are they also missing the X factor that can push them back into finals like they were season before last?
You're probably right. They're probably missing that. The Petrados brothers were the difference for them that season.
But Presley Ortiz
was there as well. Yes, you're right. They are missing a player of that quality, but I think they're going to be more defensively sound this season. So perhaps you lose one, you gain the other, and that might be enough to just lift them at least into the top 6 contention, which is where they finished last time Mirko Jurel was in charge. So who knows? I
think they are. I would suggest, in spite of the squad turnover, this may seem counterintuitive, a picture of stability. Yes.
Wollongong Wolves, they were 8th on the table at the end of the 2025 season. They had 10 wins, 10 draws, and 10 losses. For goals, they had 42 for and 38 against. In the Waratah Cup, they were out in round 5 to SD Raiders. And in the Australian Championship, they were out in the group stage to Marconi and Heidelberg. Alex, tell us a bit about them and the journey that they've got ahead.
But gee, they were unlucky to be knocked out.
You nearly commentated the greatest game ever seen, Mulch.
It was just. I don't know how.
I'm laughing just thinking about it.
I'm sitting here 3 months later. I still don't know how to describe it. It was one of those rare times you're almost lost for words as a commentator.
The way I put it was, thank goodness we point the cameras at NPL games now, because if you told that story to someone, if you'd gone to the game and there was no camera and they were relying purely on you spinning a yarn, they wouldn't believe you. They genuinely wouldn't believe you. So I mean, that's why we love this league and we love this level of football, because you get incidences like, hey, Marconi's just about through. They only go out if they lose by 6 today. And in the last minute of the game, Wollongong Wolves blow a gilt-edged chance to score the 6th.
Yes, and it fell to Banrick, and I feel so badly for Banrick. He's one of the loveliest blokes you'll meet around the competition. Very quiet, which is unusual for a centre-back, and gee, I wish he gets that moment. I hope he gets a moment like that again over the course of this season.
With that said, as fun as they were in the Australian Championship, let's not forget the halfway goal down in Tassie against South Hobart as well. Their NPL form has been underwhelming. They have teased us with the prospect of potentially challenging for finals and not made it in the last couple of years, albeit that is an improvement of where they were at the start of the 2020s, where they weren't really in contention for finals. So what do we make of the evolution of the Wollongong Wolves? Also not playing at Wynn Stadium this season as well.
Yes. Well, I think it's going to be one of the worst away trips in the competition, to be honest. Macedonia Park is somewhere that most teams don't like travelling. And once they get there, they don't like playing on the pitch either. So I think that's going to play to their advantage. The fact they've kept Lachlan Scott, the fact they've kept those 2 big signings from the championship in terms of Kazuya Yamamura and Tate Russell, who was the pick of their players for me, along with Scott in the championship. Flynn Madden came in and made himself a key player for them. And they've got guys who've been around the league for long enough. It's almost cliched about Wollongong rather. I think they're going to be really difficult to beat at home, and then perhaps struggle on the road a little bit, which is probably going to leave them just outside the top 6. But
is it going to leave them with a record like 10, 10, and 10, and almost dead level on goal difference?
Very much could, Teo.
Yeah,
it very much could. I can't see a massive improvement in this squad, and the fact they've lost Nick Olsen means they're going to have to find goals from somewhere else. Let's hope that Lockie Scott can get through the season unscathed, because we saw the drop off in their performances when he was injured last year.
They are a permanent, foundation member of the Australian Championship. So how much is that a factor in what they do in the mid-season window, as opposed to, say, finish the NPL season, and then try to add really late in the bespoke window, which is essentially what they did at the end of the NPL last season. Now that they know what the actual calendar and the rhythm of the season is, do you think they add more in time to improve their NPL prospects, or do you think they keep their powder dry and do the big recruiting like Isaac Danzo coming in just for the Australian Championship?
I think they'll want to add more in the middle of the year. It's just about being really selective with the players that they bring in, because it is an ask. Unless you are an Illawarraite, going down there and travelling and being there, I think once you get down there, it's a really good club to be a part of. There's a great camaraderie between the players. There's a lot of positives to being down there. It's a small squad, which means you're generally playing if you are brought in. But yeah, again, it's got to be the right player at the right time. I don't know that any of them fell into their lap midway through last season. Let's hope for their sake it happens once or twice this year.
Sydney Olympic were 7th on the table. They had 12 wins, 7 draws, 11 losses. They had 50 goals for and 38 goals against. In the Waratah Cup, they were out in round 6 to Sydney United 58. They were another Australian Championship team. They were in the group stage behind South Melbourne and Moreton City, and unfortunately didn't progress from there. Alex, what's this year looking like for them?
We talked about turnover in terms of St George City. Sydney Olympic have almost ripped up their contracts, and I think there's 3 retained players from the ones that were there last year in Josh Hong, Peter Politis, and Ziggy Gordon. So it's a big job for a new coach. A big turnover of player. That's not to say there's not a quality of player there, because, Peter Grozos, Daniel Wong, we've seen what they've done at this level. I think Josip Orlovic is a very solid NPL goalkeeper that comes in, but there is a lack of depth just looking at the names we've got so far from them. And, it's going to be difficult for them to be up competing for finals again this year if that is all that is at David Mangrove's disposal.
It's hard to believe that they lose last minute to Sydney United and with in the penultimate round, and that left them finishing 7th on the table. Australian Championship went incredibly badly, perhaps the low point, losing at home to Broadmeadow Magic. And off-field, on-field, it seems like there's never far from a headline, never far from a drama. But I guess the good thing is they've got a big fan base.
Yes.
And if things are going badly, I don't think they're at the point where the fan base are disaffected that they wouldn't be able to rally within the community and find more people to put their hand up, whether it's recruitment, whether it's, overhauling the club's administration and so forth. I guess we have the cautionary tale down in Victoria of Melbourne Knights. Former NSL powerhouse, had been sort of middle of the road for their 20 years of NPL ever since leaving the NSL. And the perception for all of 2025 was, this is the Melbourne Knights. They're too big. They're too good to go down. And then they were relegated with 3 games to go. And Victoria is very different in that they have 3 at the bottom of a 14-team league, straight down, no pro-rel playoff. Knights finished last. It's not like they were squeezed into that third last spot. So, I don't want to use the R word with Sydney Olympic just yet, but you can't also fall into the trap of thinking that, this is a blue ribbon prestige club. And, relegation doesn't happen to us.
No, there are big changes happening there this year. So, you're right. It's probably a good thing there is that warning sign there. I think the playing group have got to come together and recognise that this is not going to be a straightforward year for them. And perhaps even provide a shock, surprise us. Show us that you are better than we're expecting going into the season, because there's quite a few players in that squad that are capable of performing above what they have produced in the past.
But I think that has been the core frustration of Sydney Olympic, that they felt as though they had good squads that weren't delivering after that championship, which is now 4 years ago.
What's that thing?
Premiership 4 years ago.
Yes. Yeah. Well, so they're opening the campaign against Blacktown City, and we're going to talk about them shortly. Hard to think that 4 years ago they were competing on the final day to win the premiership. I think both are a fair way from that going into 2026.
Well, we'll wait and see, and hopefully they're not playing this in the change rooms before they run out to compete in round 1.
Wouldn't put it past anybody.
City United 58 were 6th at the end of the 2025 season. They had 14 wins, 7 draws and 9 losses. They had 41 goals for, 39 goals against. They were eliminated by Marconi in the NPL elimination final. In the Waratah Cup, they won against Northern Tigers, and it was a stunning game. In the Australian Cup, they were out to Sydney FC. in the round of 16. And for the Australian Championship, they were finished in the group stage last, behind Bayswater, Metro Stars and Apia.
I guess if there was one team who probably wished the off-season had gone a little bit longer, it might have been Sydney United, because we spent the Australian Championship wondering exactly what they were trying to get out of it, and I think by the end of it, they were too.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I'll disagree with you on the fact that they wish the off-season had run longer, though. I think they're ready to get back out there.
Okay, interesting.
I think the club has got a real attitude of, we're going to right this. We're going to show people that the Australian Championship was not a failure of planning, not a failure of the players out there, just an error. It was 6 games. We're going to come again in 2026. We're going to come into this NPL season. We're going to reinvigorate our fan base. We're going to basically change the narrative from what it was towards the end of last year. And I have to say, looking at their squad, I was concerned towards the end of last year, but the couple of incomings, the re-addition of the experienced players who were missing during that championship campaign, namely Adrian Vlastelica, Michael Glasick, and Mason Wells, sorry. I think they're a chance of, more than a chance, I think they're dark horses to go all the way, Teo. I really do.
In to win the grand final or to finish first on the ladder?
I think they could do one or either. I really think they're that strong. Liam McGing back as well, of course. And when you talk about Koya Nakano is a player, I think that was done a disservice by the fact that he had so many injuries around him in his first 6 games at the club. I think he's going to step into this side and really add a measure of ability. And then Tomoki Wada, another Japanese player who we know the quality of in this competition returning to Australia. My big question is, where are the goals coming from? Kyle Chimenti, 3 years where he's not been able to get himself fit and playing consistently.
Leroy Jennings.
This is his time to step up. And then Michael Krislovic showed in flashes that if they need a backup, he could be that guy. There's plenty of young talent there too, Teo.
Oh, yeah, I think Dylan Rose is a really good signing. I've liked everything I've seen from him at an NPL level. Not sure how they're going to deploy him, because at Sydney FC he was often a bit of a number 8, sort of a box-to-box midfielder.
I think there's room in there in that squad for a player of that profile.
And they've held on to guys who are just good, I would say, NPL players, like Bailey Rule.
Yes.
Good NPL player. You're right. The squad hasn't turned over nearly as much to have us sounding the alarm. And yeah, it wouldn't shock me if they make finals under Miro. If as you say, they have a renewed appetite and vigor to get out there and play, which I think, to be fair, in the Australian Championship, they did not have. They were ready for the season to end.
I couldn't agree more. I think they're a lock for the 6th, though, Teo.
A lock?
Do.
Okay,
I think they're a lock for the 6th.
Good to hear some optimism.
Blacktown City were 5th at the end of the 2025 season. They had 15 wins, 5 draws and 10 losses. And they had 50 goals for and 50 goals against. Pretty even numbers there. They were out in the NPL elimination final to Rockdale. And in the Waratah Cup, they were out to SD Raiders in round 7. Alex, what can we expect from them?
Well, if you look at this squad on paper, you wouldn't think overhaul, but Blacktown City have not moved out this many players in a very long time. It's sort of the end of an era in terms of the 2022 grand final winning squad. Yes, there's still Travis Major and Mitch Marlier there, but Danny Choi's gone. Adam Berry is still around, but his brother Ben is off this season to St. George City, so there's a couple of changes there, but I really like the incomings, Teo. I think there's a measure of quality there that I perhaps wasn't expecting towards the end of last year. And if Jack O'Brien can get back to his best goal-scoring form, then there's every reason to believe that they'll be back competing for the top 6 again, as they seem to every year.
I think they're going to be such a tough team to play against. Grimaldi, Sparrowchino. Like, they're going to be warriors, this Blacktown City team. And with Mark Crittenden as the coach, they're going to have someone to the Army General to make sure that it doesn't end in yellow and red cards on a weekly basis.
And I think a part of that last year was that Critto had wanted to play a quite proactive style and probably was relying on some older players to get that done. He's got this squad younger. He's got it more mobile. And I think they are going to be able to really run with teams this year, which was, I think, where they were getting unstuck at different stages of last season. It wasn't a week in, week out problem, but when you play on that pitch at, that probably is due for a relaying at Landon Stadium, it means that the quality of game you're not going to get there is probably not going to be the highest, and intensity is going to bring out the winner. They're a better suited squad this year, by my eye, to playing at their home ground.
Marconi, they were 3rd on the ladder. They had 19 wins, 5 draws, 6 losses. They had 48 goals for, 29 goals against. They were out in the semi-final in the NPL to Apia Leichhardt. In the Waratah Cup, they were eliminated again by Apia in round 7, and they lost the Australian Championship final to South Melbourne. What's their year looking like, Alex?
Well, Nick Carl said to me earlier this week that you didn't want to be a centre-back at Marconi Stallions last year. Every single one of them spent time out with injury, which was a big concern. They've got everybody fit and ready to go again this year. I'm hearing there's going to be some pretty significant additions that haven't quite been released yet, but are going to... They're going to fill the holes left by some of the departed. Your Tasmota Kudis, who's off. Dom Costanzo's gone back to South Australia via Apia in that championship. And then you've still got the leadership of Marko Jesic there, his strike partner last year in Damien Sekenes. I think Peter will want a little bit more output for those two in terms of getting goals on the board, but there's still going to be a defensive nightmare for teams. And Marconi Stadium is one of the toughest places to go in the competition.
But is it? Because I think their home
Is
form...
it a myth?
Yeah, it was their home form a little bit
It was
soft
better
at
in
times.
the championship, wasn't it?
Well, did it cost them a proper crack at the premiership last season that they just dropped too many points at home? I mean, they've got a great squad. They should be right up there again. Franco Meyer, I think we touted ourselves as experts on NPL New South Wales, and he didn't hold up his end of the bargain
that's right.
in the Australian Championship because we told the rest of the country he was the player to watch and he was going to go to the next level. So I'm looking forward to him coming back and showing everyone what he's all about. But Mulch, yeah, what was actually the reason their home form didn't match the quality on paper? And is that something that they can resolve this season? Because you wouldn't put it past them to go unbeaten at home after tweaking some of those problems.
No, I tend to agree. I think it was just injuries at very inopportune moments, Teo. They lost centre-backs before they'd had the time to get Tasmota Kudis. They had to wait, basically, until there was a third of the season left to bring him in as a reinforcement. And, you know, the way they are set up relies a lot on that backline. It meant they were flipping players around like Tyrone Burney, who's such a threat from right back. You lose that when you're playing him in the heart of defence. The other thing I'm interested to see is how they fill the holes in the centre of midfield, because it was Van der Sarg and James Bayliss who were playing there in tandem during the championship, and they did a fantastic
Bayliss, who's
job.
since gone on to Auckland.
Exactly, Auckland and Van
he's
der Sarg
ticking
is
off all
elsewhere.
the new leagues.
Exactly right. And Van der Sarg is elsewhere heading into 2026. Julian Monge, I think is going to be set for a few more minutes this year, and then there might be one or two to bolster that central midfield position as well before we start the season.
NWS Spirit, they finished first and are the 2025 NPL premiers. They had 20 wins, 6 draws, 4 losses. They had 67 goals for and 30 against. In the Waratah Cup, they were out in the semi-final to Rockdale. In the Australian Cup, they were out in round 6 from Apia Leichhardt. In the Australian Championships, they were out in the quarterfinals to South Melbourne. Bit of changes there, Alex, this year.
Big time, but perhaps not as many as sort of people are anticipating. You know, the core of that side that won the premiership is still there. There's a lot of key players down the spine of the team. I know that's a word people love to use, so I'll use it here. And they brought in Costa Petrados, who is obviously returning from an ACL injury, but the last full season he played for St. George City was outstanding at this level. And I think could be in the hat as one of the signings of the off-season.
But everyone associates last season's Spirit with the front three.
Yes.
And that is very hard to replicate.
But a lot of it was down to their defensive discipline as well, Teo. So, you know, perhaps it's only half the equation that remains there, and that's what new coach Sergio Malfara's got to sort out. But, you know, I think there's a thought out there in the NPL New South Wales universe that they're just going to sink like stones into mid-table. I'm not necessarily sure that's the case.
So you're saying it is a good job to inherit at Spirit?
I think it's better than I thought it was come the end of last year. Let's put it that way.
How do you think did the Australian Championship materially change the trajectory of this team? I guess many of those players turning around off a shorter break, maybe not as deep a squad, a little bit more demanding. I mean, some people have put to me that it's a 13-month season, finishing the Australian Championship and then coming back to start the NPL so soon. Is that the sort of thing that actually could pinch them, or do you feel like they've got enough fresh faces, enough promoted players from within And then maybe if it is a problem, the transfer window falls at the right time to do something about it.
Yeah, look, I'm not saying I think it's going to be a second straight premiership. Let's not go that far. I think a piece of silverware this year would be another, probably even bigger achievement, given what they've lost. But I still think they're going to be in and around the finals conversation. You're right. Could they use one or two more signings? Probably. Are they the character of club that are going to go out and really aggressively pursue that? Who knows? I don't think so outwardly, but they could throw up a shock for us as well. I still think they're around the top 6.
Rockdale were runner-up 4th, and for their stats for last year's season, they had 15 wins, 10 draws, 5 losses, and one of those losses was the 2025 NPL Grand Final against RPL Leichhardt. For goals, they had 68 for and 41 against. In the Waratah Cup, they were out in round 6 because of SD Raiders. Alex, what can we expect? What are we looking forward to? Tell us about them.
Well, there's a lot of question marks about this side because they've lost basically their 3... they're the 3 defining players. I think it's fair to say that. Alec Uriseski, Blake Rashudo, and Braden Sorge, although an unsung hero for most of his Rockdale career, any of their supporters will tell you just how important he's been to their success over the last 5 years. So Paul D's got a big job on his hands. The whole coaching staff there at Rockdale have a big job on their hands to replace those players adequately. We're hearing that the players they're bringing in are of a caliber that are NPL level and upper half of the table NPL level, but are they going to be top 6 locks this year? I think the answer is no. Are they going to play entertaining football and probably surprise a few teams? I still think the answer is yes.
We also forget, yes, they course corrected to win the elimination final and the semi-final, but they were in honking form in the final third of the season. Like, if they hadn't banked enough points and had got themselves into a tussle just to make the top 6, you wouldn't have backed them to make it. They had just enough points in the bank that no one was able to catch them. But they really faded. And I guess, it was one last ride was last season. Now we venture into the great unknown with this team, both in terms of the names we can talk about today that have joined the squad and also the direction that they want to go as a club into the future, I imagine.
Yeah, because they're not although they've got a very good community around that club, they've not been one that have traditionally been particularly successful.
And we have to address that Bankstown City.
Yes.
It's
coming.
It's 2 clubs of Macedonian heritage that are, in different places. One's in the 2nd division trying to get promoted. One's been sort of at the top end of the top division for a number of years now. And you kind of can't talk about one without the other. So while we're not going to be talking much about League One today, the Rockdale conversation can't be had without talking about where Alek Urashevsky has gone.
Yes. So Bankstown City, League One, I think heavy favourites to take out that competition because of the calibre of players they've signed, because they brought Fabian Michelli on board. But what remains for Rockdale is still the makings of a solid team and one that can be competitive. Again, I don't think they're going to be in the conversation for silverware this year, but they could prove us wrong.
Finishing up with our squad and team previews, we have RPL Leichhardt. They were 2nd at the end of the season. They had 20 wins, 4 draws, 6 losses. They had 75 goals for and 35 goals against. They were the 2025 NPL Championship winners who played Rockdale in the grand final. For the Waratah Cup, they were in the semi-finals and unfortunately lost to Northern Tigers. In the Australian Cup, they were out in the round of 16 to Avondale. And in the Australian Championships, they were out in the quarterfinal to Marconi.
It's not often you talk about the NPL champions and say, gee, they probably should have won more.
I couldn't agree more.
Genuinely, they could have swept the board last season. And it took some, a mind-blowing upset in the Waratah Cup to foil them in the semi-final. Australia Cup, Avondale beat them fair and square on maybe a forgettable night for their defence. And then in the Australian Championship, they lost the match of the tournament in a penalty shootout to one of the all-time great goalkeeping performances. And yet they still ended up top of the pops winning the championship. And I guess, Alex, before we get on to this year's squad, why do you think they couldn't run down Spirit? I mean, I know they lost to them 3-0 at home early in the season, but there was enough of the season after that point that they never really bridged the gap.
It was a sluggish start, and Franco Parisi will admit that. He experimenting with just how he wanted to set this team up, knowing the length of the campaign, knowing the fact that he was going to have to use every member of their very big squad.
And that's the thing. You lose to Spirit in February or March, and you're thinking about the first week of December
Exactly right.
and the Australian Championship final. And everyone forgave Apia for that at the time. I guess now that they've had a trial run of just how long that journey is, would it be fair to expect them to manage the squad in a way that they do not start as slow as they do?
Well, if you look at Kyle Shaw has been their biggest signing so far in this offseason that we've heard about, and that just comes in to bolster that defence. Having lost Drayden Kelly as well, so they needed to go 1-for-1 there. They've got Temba Muatamalo, and a big shout out to him. A long recovery from an ACL. It'll be great to see him hopefully back in round one. And then the fact that they've just managed to retain almost everybody. And then add to that with players like Michael Conostabbo, who was one of the pick of the competition last year. You can't go past them as favourites. I think they're a chance to be the first team to do the double since Olympic back in 2018 under Abbas Saad. I think that's how good and deep this team is. One of the players of the competition in Seiya Kambiyashi returns again. Hopefully he'll be playing up in the attacking half of the field from week one this year. There were just those little wrinkles that Franco Parisi had to get through at the start of the year, and he's not got them looking at the team on paper as we sit here in January this year.
Do you think they sell Max Court overseas at some point?
Probably.
During the season?
I think we're going to see a lot more of him than we did last year, and even the bits and starts that we saw are very, very impressive. And then you've got Oscar Gonzalez, who made a name for himself in the Australian Championship as well. They have everything at the moment. They're the envy of every club in this competition.
Do they keep everyone happy with game time? It's great for Apia that Alex Denmead is back, but if he's not starting, or does it mean that Rory Jordan is not starting? Does it mean that other players have been squeezed to the bench? Is that just a credit to how they've sold the mission, that if you stay with us, there are enough games. We will go on cup runs. We've got the Australian Championship. Don't sweat a lack of game time in March and April, because it will be coming in, July to September. I
think a lot of that is having the really experienced and, solid pros from an NPL perspective. Guys like Sean Simmons and, barely played in the Australian Championship, Adrian Uchino, but he is such a binding force for them. I think they've got such strong characters in that dressing room that if there are players stepping out of line or unhappy, one, they're either happy to, put an arm around them and keep them engaged in the club's project, or on the other side of things, they're happy for them to move on if they're not getting the game time that they want or think they deserve.
So you're quite optimistic. You think that every trophy was genuinely on the table last season, and it's back on the table this season.
Very much so. Very much so, Teo.
So that's Apia, and that's all our individual clubs. We'll take a quick break on kickoff, and when we come back, we will go through some rapid-fire predictions. And these are the ones that you're going to want to play to the dressing room before they run out to play at a key point of the season.
We're kicking off with our rapid fire. Alex, are you ready?
I'm ready, Maeve. Let's go.
Signing of the summer.
Nick Olsen to the Sharks.
I think it's David Perkovic to the Sharks. Hey, you said signing, you didn't say player.
No, very good point.
Who do you think will be the breakout star of the season?
I've got to go Max Cord. It's a boring answer, but he is so talented.
I think with the Sydney United fan base behind him, I think it'll be Dylan Rose. I'm a big rap for him.
Predicted top goal scorer?
There's no Alec Kurasevsky. This has been an easy answer the last few years. In his absence, I'm going Nick Olsen to Sharks.
You think he'll be a more of a goal scorer than an assist maker?
If Perko plays the back five, which I'm expecting him to, he will be more central than he was a winger last year at Wolves.
I think during the Blacktown City segment, I've sold myself on them to bounce back up the ladder, and Jack O'Brien will be a big beneficiary of that. So, a close golden boot race, I'm picking Jack O'Brien.
Club to watch that you think that will surprise people?
I've got a few listed here. I think top of my list is St. George City. I think they're going to have a big year and be pushing for finals.
I like picking the Wollongong Wolves because they're always a compelling proposition with the, not just the NSL history, but the unique geography and the difficult away trip. I think they'll be a club to watch in terms of entertainment. They were certainly one of the teams to watch in the Australian Championship. So let's roll that into the NPL season.
And I think SD Raiders are going to have a good year. They're going to be very entertaining. And Spirit and Sydney United, I think you can expect to see more out of them than some expect.
Now, to wrap it up, we want your top 6 predictions. Alice, kick us off.
Okay, Apia top. I don't think there's any surprise there. I think Sutherland are going to be close to them in a 2-horse race. Then I'll have either of Marconi and Sydney United finishing behind them, and then the 2 sort of surprise packages in the battle for the 6 and a lot of clubs that I think could make it. Spirit and St George City coming out in 5th and 6th.
Okay, I agree with you on Apia. I've still got Marconi second. I'm putting Blacktown City third because of, I think kind of taking on trust the blue bloods of the competition.
Yes.
I've got Sutherland rising to fourth.
Okay.
I mean, that might look like a silly prediction if everything clicks for them and they steamroll straight away, but fourth for now. You've sold me on Sydney United. Looking at the squad in one list of players, I'm feeling pretty optimistic. I mean, they did make finals last season,
Yes.
so why not again this season? And I'm going totally rogue with this one in a tough league to pick who comes sixth. And without knowing 2/3, if not 3/4 of their squad, I'm putting Rockdale in the 6th.
Okay.
I'm not jumping off Rockdale.
Okay.
All right. So to finish up the podcast, let's look at round 1. Of course, this season, the catchphrase, the catch cry of NPL Men's New South Wales is real football, homegrown. And so, Maeve, take us through who's playing at home and who's playing who in round 1 of the 2026 season.
On Friday, the 6th of Feb, we have Manly United versus St George City. We also have Sydney FC versus SD Raiders, both at 7:30 on the Friday. On Saturday, the 7th of February at 5 p.m, we have Sydney Olympic versus Blacktown City. On this Saturday as well, we have Spirit FC versus Sutherland Sharks at 5:30. We also have St George FC versus Wollongong Wolves at 6:30. We have the Derby d'Italia, another rerun of the Australian Championship quarterfinal rounds. We have Marconi Stallions versus RPL Leichhardt at 7 p.m. On the Sunday, 8th of February, we have Western Sydney Wanderers versus Rockdale at 3 p.m. We also have Sydney United 58 versus UNSW at 4:30 p.m. Those are the fixtures for round 1. Tell us, what are you guys thinking about that?
Well, Spirit versus Sutherland is straight away where my eye is drawn. I believe it's our match of the round in round 1 on the Football New South Wales YouTube channel. Looking forward to watching it. David Perkovic returning to face his old side. I think 2 clubs that are going to be right there or thereabouts in terms of the teams that are towards the top of the league. And I think we're going to get a really open, exciting game of football to start the season.
I think the Sunday has 2 pretty compelling games.
Yes.
It's the show me something game between Wanderers and Rockdale, because they're doing today's preview in late January. They're the teams we know the least about. And then UNSW, first game after promotion. I mean, it's welcome to the big time, kids.
Yes.
You're off to King Tom to face Sydney United at the Sydney United.
I think
Sports
they'll
Centre.
like that, though, right? Getting to visit an old
It's
historic
exciting.
ground, big club.
It's exciting to start the season, as you say, with a former NSL giant, isn't it? So, but there's something, I think, credit to whoever drew up this fixture, because there's something for everyone here. And I will say this, down south of the border, the Mexicans have a random fixture draw. They do not use marketing in putting together their fixture, whereas here in civilized Football New South Wales NPL, we have actual blockbuster games to open the season. So bravo to the fixture, and it's a perfect way to kick off the season.
I cannot wait, Teo. It's very, very exciting. Maeve will be seeing you around the grounds as well. I love all the social stuff that gets thrown up. It's a very exciting time of year.
And to anyone who is not familiar with the Football New South Wales media landscape, maybe you're becoming a content creator at this level of football, maybe you want to break into that space, maybe you just love talking about the game and you haven't given NPL a go, but you want to get out and try. Maeve, just tell us a little bit about your experience over the last 12 months creating content and sort of, the experience of getting out to NPL football, because it's been a pretty exciting journey for you. And I imagine that, we want to amplify and grow these clubs. And the clubs want to as well. They want to grow their footprint and their presence and have more people talking about the NPL. So, Maeve, just give us your perspective on that as someone considerably younger than me, but also someone who's from a different generation of media talking about football.
100%. I think the clubs want the coverage, the fans want the coverage, the players also want the coverage as well. It's important to build that homegrown football. And for me, my experience was a lot at grassroots level for my local club. And then coming into the NPL, which, is the top of the top level that you can experience, being there on the grounds, seeing the players, seeing the passion, the energy, the athleticism, and also too for the coaching, the technical aspects and how much time and energy goes into this. what you see on the match of the round and on our socials is just a tiny little glimpse. It cannot compare to what you're feeling on the ground. And I'm sure, Alex, you can attest to this, being there on the grounds, capturing that, on the stream or on the socials is so different. So make sure you tune in on the live streams. They're very important to watch, especially at the start of the season, to see who's going to make that top 6, what kind of vibe is it going to be. But yes, tune into the match of the rounds with me and also our other content creators to see what's going on.
And the one thing I'd say about getting out to the grounds, it's a purer sense of football. You can go to the A-League and get that professional level. This is what it's meant to be, out amongst communities, very unique atmospheres and grounds and food, and all the sights and smells are completely different to what you're getting elsewhere around the country in football.
And if you want to dabble in both, I mean, I really see like the benefit of following the NPL avidly is that the A-League becomes an open book test.
Big time.
You already know the answers before you're asked the questions because you know the players that are coming out of the academies or get recruited out of the NPL before they come into the professional level. And the Australian Championship means that we're at a time where the game is evolving. I mean, we have picked Arpia to finish top. In fact, who was the highest non-Australian Championship team you had in your top 6, Mulch?
I had Sutherland. I've got Sutherland second.
You had Sutherland.
I think
I had Blacktown City. Okay, so there we go. We did, and that's the thing. If a non-foundation member of the Australian Championship finishes highest on the ladder, Spirit won the premiership last season to go through, but if they'd finished second, they still would have got there. So I imagine that we have a pretty exciting season coming up. Get out there while the weather is good. Starting the season in February may seem a little bit early and a little bit jarring for some, but for me, it's perfect, I reckon. I'm ready to kick off now. So
you're in the sunshine, and hopefully the football is just as hot.
I didn't have to wear trousers to a game until May last year. So I love being able to wear shorts to a game, and you can do that for the first 8 to 10 rounds of the season this season. Alex Molchanoff, all the best with commentary for the winter ahead. And look, enjoy the season. There's lots to look forward to. And I'm going to give your own podcast a plug from the gantry.
Yes.
We run this podcast kickoff under the Football New South Wales banner, but off your own bat, you and Will Constantinides have gone out and started from the gantry. I think, the two products have complemented each other. In growing the landscape. It's not competitive. We just want people talking about NPL level football as much and as often as possible. So all the best for the season ahead.
Weekly reviews there, and hopefully you'll hear my somewhat occasionally dulcet tones across a match every now and then as well.
And Maeve Sparrow, thank you for joining me. Looking forward to seeing you as kickoff continues through the season.
Yes, thank you for having me, Teo. Looking forward to seeing you out and about as well.
So don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You'll get the updates throughout the course of the season. Football New South Wales media manager and our producer Mark Stavroulakis is going to have the guests coming in and giving their perspective, just like last season, which worked so fantastically well. Tell you what, in terms of season narratives and who went on to do what, whether it was winning trophies, whether it was getting promoted, whether it was breaking into the A-Leagues at the next level up, we had a really interesting and almost the crystal ball was out in force last season. Definitely. So hopefully it is the case again on kickoff this season. Thanks for your company. My name's Teo Pellizzeri. On behalf of Maeve Sparrow and Alex Molchanoff, it's goodbye from us.
The overhead kick, and what a goal it was! Stewart makes it 1-1.
And it is a gorgeous little chip.
This could well be the moment. Yeah! It